to Tropes versus Men video series. And before we get too much in depth about the specific tropes that exist in television and pop culture against men currently, let's do a rundown of some definitional terms. In today's episode, objectification. Since going to the dictionary definition seems to be the popular approach to defining and understanding terms in our society, let's go to objectification. Objectification is something that was pioneered, or at least brought to the mainstream, by Martha Nussbaum, who's a Western feminist philosopher. Let that sink in for a moment. There are 7 different ways in which this phenomenon, known as objectification, can occur according to Martha Nussbaum. And we will go one by one over these and see what we can deconstruct out of this list. Number 1, instrumentality. As a tool for another's purpose. The objectifier treats the object as a tool of his or her purposes. Now, I'm liking the gender neutrality of this definition of instrumentality. Now, things such as sweatshops in developing countries and a variety of other jobs, quote-unquote jobs, that basically are front for indentured servitude, very clearly showcase that objectification of the instrumentality type, one being used as a tool for another's purposes, is his or her purposes indeed, as it is a class issue instead of a feminist issue. So that is something that is not unique to gendered issues. It's not something that women or men in particular have to worry about. And as we saw in the case of "This is what a feminist looks like" t-shirt situation, the women who were making these shirts were indeed used as tools for the purposes of another. So in fact, they were being objectified by a feminist group. So objectification looks like something that even the feminist groups are not innocent of doing. And I do agree that we need to have a general reduction of having people used as tools for another's purposes, yet as we can see, that's kind of a muddy definition without any clear borders. So at what point do we define what becomes a tool for another's purposes? If you use parts of this video for educational purposes, are you using me as a tool for your purposes? I mean, in a way, yes. Number 2, the second way to be objectified, according to Martha Nussbaum, is denial of autonomy, as if lacking an agency or self-determination. The objectifier treats the object as lacking in autonomy and self-determination. Well, let's think about that for a moment. We might need to have stricter definitional terms of what is this object and objectifier in terms of their relationship to each other and their seniority to each other, as I can think of very many examples that deny specifically agency and self-determination. In fact, things such as young children being corralled for their own safety and protection by their parents, and not allowed to self-determine in terms of picking their name, even, or picking the clothes they wear, or what kindergarten they go to, or what extracurricular activities they engage in. There were people that got forced into, chess or piano or swimming or whatever else. So there's certainly denial of autonomy that happens between parents and children quite frequently. And lacking of agency is, once yet again, we're back to a classist issue, and something that I'm quite impressed by a Western philosopher to have brought out. The first 2 points are pretty much class issues of having autonomy and denial of autonomy. Denial of autonomy is certainly imposed on impoverished neighborhoods and children who are orphans, or in developing countries that have been left in ruins as a result of peace bombings by the US and things like that, and the freedom bombings. And so we have plenty of issues where the poorer nations and people do not have the same advantages and the same access to self-actualization, self-determinations, and their agency is quite greatly reduced. In fact, it's not even a classist issue as much as a religious issue sometimes, and a political issue, as we see with Gaza and Israel situation, where Gaza Strip is the biggest open-air prison in the entire world, where they are not allowed, the Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip are not allowed to leave. Agency and self-determination is most definitely denied on the basis of political and religious conflict. So it's certainly not a gender issue. Once again, so second one for feminism denied. Now let's think about how we can conceive of instrumentality in a way that, in fact, would exclude the female gender entirely. Lacking in self-determination and agency for women, that seems to be a highly questionable claim to make. As we look through history and up to the present day, women have been in varied roles, from queens to peasants to storytellers to scientists, and I don't see how we would consider something lacking in self-determination to be a female problem. In fact, in very recent years, since the tsunami of the third wave feminism in the especially the 60s, late 60s and 70s, and onward to the present day, there's been a push for the empowerment of women at the exclusion of men. There have been women-only clubs and bars that have opened up, presumably as a response to male-only gentlemen's clubs. So that would seem to be a fair thing, yet there are also businesses and nonprofit groups and shelters worldwide, massive amounts, that have sprung up that are women only, and men are denied help, yet there's not been a push for male-only shelters across the world. Men would be hard-pressed to find shelters, and an idea of a male-only company that is part of its mission statement, or a male-only nonprofit, would be seen as something incredibly offensive by society at large. Yet we have that kind of thing for women-only groups. So it seems like lacking in agency or self-determination is something that we place on men a little more than women in our society, especially in the recent 30 to 40 years. Now, the third one on the objectification list is inertness, as if without action. The objectifier treats the object as lacking in agency and perhaps also in activity. So that's just kind of a very strange one in general, and seems, if I were to deconstruct this seriously, but why do that? It seems like something that is anti-sedentary people, something that is ableist, or perhaps maybe someone who is considering, I mean, it seems like a fat people issue, not a women issue. But if I were to deconstruct this seriously, I can conceive of this as a sociopathy issue, where, as we know, a certain significant percentage, or at least more significant than we'd like it to be, of the population is considered rating pretty high on a sociopathic scale. So what we have here is a concept of other people as nothing more than paper dolls, cutouts, kind of things in the person's own environment. So not sure how to describe this better than a 2-year-old playing peekaboo. You know, when the parent closes their face, the 2-year-old believes that the person ceases to exist, and then is very amazed when the person opens their eyes again. So this is a similar idea of not having a developed concept of others. This idea that, you know, if you close your eyes, or if you turn away from the people you're interacting with, that they cease to exist, that they have no lives of their own, that they don't do anything, they don't act upon the world, and they merely are there as part of your environment, kind of like NPCs, something that is completely existent for your own enrichment of your environment. So that is very much a sociopathy issue, and there's been no clear studies on or clear demonstration on sociopathy being a gendered or sexually dimorphic disorder. It seems to be something that afflicts men and women fairly equally. So I do not see how, once again, this is, I don't see how it's a feminist issue at all. Now, inertness is something we can also think about in the context of another hotly debated topic, which is rights of parents, or rather custodial rights, so which gender is more apt of caring for children. And there is very widely believed and propagated rhetoric going around the feminist circles and the matriarchal circles, which is mothers, single mothers with children who have divorced their husbands, or who never had husbands in the first place. We see that there's an abundance of ideas that men do not care about their children, that they would rather, be at Hooters eating hot wings and watching football, or something else rather than being with the children. Yet, as we know from experience and basic reasoning and logic and science, is that men bond with their children as well after they are born. And not to mention that there's ample evidence that men are devoted and wonderful fathers and do care about their children. Those men who are deprived of ability to see their children are very upset about it, and that's one of the basic platforms of men's rights issues, is that women unfairly take away children through this idea that men have no love or desire to be with their children, yet these men fight them in court for custody. Fourth point, under the subjectification umbrella, is fungibility, as if interchangeable. The objectifier treats the object as interchangeable with other objects of the same type and or with objects of other types. It's very confusing to be talking about objects of one type and interchanging with objects of another type. The word object is such a broad term. It's kind of like saying noun. A person can be a noun, a cat or a lamp, or, a rock can be a noun, but there's a huge difference between the autonomy and value and fungibility of these things. So here we have something that is very loosely worded, but once again, we can think of this as something that is a class issue. The whole point of unions is so that we reduce fungibility for workers, so that a corporation or a business owner can't just go, hey, you worker, get out because I don't like your face. Let's get someone else who is just like you, or I don't care, like whatever, it's the same thing. I'll pay him less. That's a bonus for me. There's no value given to that person as an individual and what they bring to the company. This is definitely something we see happening as part of the capitalist system, and not a gendered issue once again. Number 5 is violability. As if permissible to damage or destroy. Violence. The objectifier treats the object as lacking in boundary integrity, as something that is permissible to break up, smash, break into. Now that is something we hear quite frequently about, violence against women and ending that. And unfortunately, we hear very little about ending violence against men. And as a proper humanist, I believe that we need to end or try to move towards aiding individuals who are violent or excluding them from society as much as possible. However, it's not a gendered issue, once again. It is something we can, in fact, consider to be a male issue in recent times, especially if street tests are any indication. We see ample evidence that when a male is violating a female and damaging her in public, people will jump to her rescue and stop and restrain this violent person, this violent male. However, when you see a woman publicly abusing a male, his violability is not considered. He is conceived of as permissible to damage or destroy. The instant thought is, oh, he probably deserves it, or oh, he probably has done something. How violently sick is that? Is that when we see a female abusing a male and physically breaking in and damaging and acting as if it is something that is permissible to break up, smash, or break into. When we see a woman conceiving of a male in that way and treating him as such, we immediately think of excuses why she is allowed to do that. While when we see a man even thinking about doing something like that, we are ready to lock him up in jail. So, in fact, violability is a gender issue, but it is a men's issue and not a female's issue. Number 6, ownership, as if owned by another. The objectifier treats the object as something that is owned by another, can be bought or sold, etc. Once again, well, we're back to class issues where people are sold, children, boys, and girls are sold by their parents, and once again, it seems to be a seniority issue and a parental boundaries issue more than any others. In the Western world, especially, there is a hard, it'd be hard to find people being sold to each other in any way where agency is not accounted for. The only thing I can think of is one of those pay a certain amount to go on a date with someone, but even those are like an auction for charity. But even those, you don't buy the person, you just buy their time. So this seems like ownership seems to be something that dates back, not that many years ago. In fact, it was legal to hunt bushmen in Africa until 1920s, and which is just insane. But ownership is a big problem that especially comes along with a capitalist society, and I certainly agree that it is an issue. So far, as we have seen, about 4 of the top 6, well, 4 out of 7 so far, have been classist issues that capitalism is directly responsible for creating, and which is very interesting and refreshing to be seeing from a Western philosopher. So number 7, denial of subjectivity. As if there is no need for concern for their feelings and experiences. The objectifier treats the object as something whose experience and feelings, if any, need to be not taken into account. So denial of subjectivity, denial of one's feelings. If I can think of any examples of something like this in our society and pop culture, it would definitely be a gendered issue towards men. Once again, expressing their feelings is something that is being campaigned that men should do more as a result of a long time of this rhetoric and pop culture conception that men do not have feelings simply because they choose to not express them in the same way that women do. So in fact, as we know from Lifetime movies and any romantic comedy, or rather any sitcom, any cartoon, any blockbuster movie, women and their emotionality and subjectivity of their experiences and their perspective and their unique view on the world of each individual woman is seen as something that is integral to being a woman, is something that you cannot conceive of a woman without this. Yet when we think of a man, we do not associate any of those concepts with the man. So in fact, it is quite a gendered issue towards men, in that they're considered as as objects that do not have feelings, or if they do have feelings, well, they're probably stupid, as we see with the critique of very many men's rights groups. In fact, all of them, men's rights movement in general, is being considered by the feminist movement as something that is not valid, and that these men's subjective experiences and their feelings, if any, need not to be taken into account. So there's your breakdown of Martha Nussbaum's objectification criteria. 2 out of 7 are issues that pertain directly towards men, and 4 out of those 7 are classist issues that are very abundant in Western society that affect the poor classes. And none of those points related to women based on observation of society and the current model of how we run the world. So there you have it. Next time you hear someone say objectification, send them this video. Perhaps some terms, just because they were coined by a feminist philosopher, get co-opted by a movement and are used against you. And when you speak these words without knowing their definition or what they apply to, it makes you sound not very intelligent. So that's just something to watch out for. And as always, keep yourself educated. Read, watch, think about your thoughts.